Hey, what is going on you guys? It's Epic here and welcome back to another Wayfinder video. We're probably live on Twitch right now at EpicNNG, so come and follow us where you can hang out and have a good time. Wayfinder's first large patch should be going live today if all things go to plan, and this is a client update, meaning you'll need to go and download the update on Steam before you can continue to play the game. It's important to note that before I get into reading off these changes, most of this isn't issues that people have currently with early access. These are changes that were planned before the early access period went live, but let's get right into it. Starting with combat and gameplay, the Night's Maw event cooldown has been reduced from 2 hours to every 60 seconds in the Highlands, thank god for that. Burst fire rifles now automatically begin firing after reloading, another great change here. Fleas will no longer continue to spawn during the Sphere of Influence event in the Highlands. The Arcane build-up mastery will now correctly increase damage based on momentum for all execution and melee weapon types. Also, the Arcane build-up mastery tier 3 will deal arcane energy bursts for all execution and melee weapon types as intended. The sniper rifle mastery will now correctly boost damage at long range, which it previously was not doing. Knockbacks will now respect dodge invincibility frames, and the echo rarity type text in the echoes menu is now going to match the rarity correctly. Into character changes, first of all with Niss, the lingering shadow buff icon is going to be refreshing correctly now in the player HUD after you get 3 stacks while it's active. For Kyros, level 3 of the arcane focus will now deal the intended additional instances of damage. It previously was not really doing this, and that's how you were seeing players hit those huge damage numbers, I believe. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. Venomess gets some overall nice feeling changes here, with venom thrusters now activating immediately and moving the player faster. Also, when using the venom thrusters with no movement input, you're not going to travel off to the side instead of going backward. And finally, using venom thrusters while ADS or blocking will no longer cause you to travel off to the side. There seems to be a lot of issues with these kind of weird targeting movement for the camera, so it looks like they're finally getting around to fixing this. Into some quest changes, players will no longer get kicked when collecting loot from lighting the flame quest during the dungeon instance. They've removed a duplicate Road to Ruin quest at Seeker of Vala in Deepwood Holt. They fixed a bug where side quest XP was scaling unintentionally with difficulty tiers, and I just really quickly want to say, this is a whack change. Straight up, bro, I'm going to talk about this more on my stream, but right now in Wayfinder, leveling is a nightmare if you've already beaten the story, and because the XP resonance isn't currently in the game, it means that leveling new characters is really difficult and tedious. So fixing this right now instead of just waiting until there are better ways to level, I think is a really bad change. The hidden knowledge side quest can now be completed in any Aurelian Lost Zone and counts for any variance of the Dakota event. Now into Lost Zone changes, known actions kicking the player with a problem saving user data have been addressed. Alternate personas will now appear equipped on the Wayfinder models at the Expedition rewards screen. This basically means, I believe, your stuff like your transmog, so if you have different transmog equipped or a different weapon on, it's going to correctly show at the end now. Gloom ambush events in the Lost Zones will now reward the player with Gloomstone shards upon completion. They've reduced the amount of enemies that spawn during the Excavation Unit, Supply Raid, Supply Run, Chain Gang, and What Lies Beneath events in the pit. And honestly, I don't think this change was necessary either. I thought the amount of enemy density was pretty damn cool. I don't think they needed to reduce this, but let me know what you guys think. Enemies at the end of Lost Zone expeditions can no longer spawn out of bounds and prevent the player's ability to complete an expedition. Very nice. Party invites can no longer be sent to any online player actively in a Lost Zone instance, and new music variations have been added to the Deep Mines expeditions. Now, for these next changes here, most of them are really good, but the first one here I am not a fan of, and this is in the Dread Legion hunt. Rifles will no longer transfer an orb to a husk enemy by shooting it during Dread Legion. For those of you who are unaware, the mechanic of Dread Legion's encounter is to kill the wyverns that spawn and then pick up the bombs they drop and shoot a husk or hit a husk in some way to transfer the bomb to them so they can then blow up. And this can be pretty tricky to do given the nature of the encounter. If you fought it, you know exactly what I mean. And I gotta be honest, man, I think this is a major L. I don't know why you would try to remove more ways players can get around an encounter. I think all you're doing is just removing diversity and unique encounters in general, and you're just kind of making it more linear. Like, there's not any reason in my eyes to prevent players who are using range builds from doing something like this. It just, to me, is a bad change. I'm not gonna go back and forth on this and try and over-validate what I feel here. I just don't think this is a good change. Next up, the number of enemies that spawn during each phase of the Dread Legion hunt has been reduced. Thank God. Dread Legion has got to be one of the worst encounters I've seen in any game, and it was in part due to just how incredibly spammy it was to the player. I started describing it as just fake injected difficulty as opposed to true difficulty that you get from other bosses, so it's nice to see that they're finally taking a look at that. And continuing on, bombs will now explode quicker when passed to an enemy in the Dread Legion hunt. That is also a very, very good change. Players can also now no longer get stuck and die between the holographic tiles in the Dread Legion hunt, another bug that was causing a lot of issues with the fight, so that's great. And now moving on, the hand rejoined ground slam attack AoE warning indicators are now visible during the Argent hand hunt. This was another thing I noticed. It made this fight very, very tricky and annoying, and I often just avoided going back to this fight because of this. So again, another good change here. And what's interesting is that for this last note here, it says fixed an issue where some hunts were rewarding unintended loot on completion. Now, at this time, I currently don't have any information on what they're referring to in particular here, but I am going to dig into this and get some answers, so stop by our Twitch stream where we'll be discussing this when we find out what that is, and I'll feel free to break that down for you guys. But as of right now, I'm not actually sure which items they're referring to and which hunt. Moving on into housing, they've reduced the amount of resources required to craft housing item recipes. I think this is a very, very good idea, because while housing is awesome and there is a lot you can do with housing, the nature of Wayfinder's crafting right now with other items, it's just not a good idea to use your resources on just building housing stuff instead, because they are very, very pricey, but it looks like that's going to be changing now. Temporarily, players will be unable to switch their equipped Wayfinder or weapon while inside their apartment. I'm guessing this is due to some form of crash or disconnect issue, but I'm not sure. And finally, the Trickster Artifice artifact now has a cooldown timer and can only be interacted with by the player who owns the apartment. So I guess you could get other players into your apartment and they could get an item from it, but that seems to have been fixed. Moving into miscellaneous, the Enchanted Tower Compass item reward from the Exalted Founders Pack will now appear in the player's key items inventory. The 5% reward tower XP is earned from the Enchanted Tower Compass item as intended. Purchased Founders Packs will now visually display as owned in the shop menu. Players can immediately equip newly acquired Wayfinders or weapons from the Founders Packs without needing to travel first. Several echoes have now been given their missing icon, and this is a huge one. Camera collision improvements have been added throughout the game. I know a lot of people have been asking for this for a while and getting really annoyed with the clunky camera movement in some areas and some arenas in Wayfinder, but it looks like they are on this and they are trying to make it as good and as clean as possible. And now finally, there are known issues and issues they are still tracking here if you guys want to take a look at these, and they also do say that they were originally in this patch going to fix the Talent of Pyre crash that you get where it would disconnect you. They say that they are still working on that and they are going to try and get it into the next build. But that's going to do it for Wayfinder's first patch. After a rocky launch, they really needed to come out swinging, and I do think that's what they've done here. Now, problem is, I don't know if this is going to be enough to keep players around with the game. A lot of people already got burned with Wayfinder, and with no compensation in the game yet for those people, which they promised, I just don't know how long people are going to still stick around for. And that's not me slighting the devs, that is still coming, they are still going to be compensating players. It's just me being completely transparent here and saying that right now, players are probably going to start getting bored pretty soon once they get into the game, and maybe they won't, maybe they will. But this is a good step in the right direction, I feel. This is a nice patch which I think is going to help the game a lot, help the game feel better, and hopefully show players that these devs really aren't lying about wanting to make the game better and improve it. But that's going to do it for the patch notes today, guys. Let me know what you think of them in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, take it easy and have a nice day.